Germany's Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen and her British counterpart, Gavin Williamson, have kicked off the Munich Security Conference. It's 3 days of high-stakes debate and closed-door meetings. The event is bringing together an unprecedented number of international decision-makers, including the largest U.S. delegation ever. A multitude of international organizations are also represented, including the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the UN. Well, the German defense minister, as we said, kicked things off, emphasizing the importance of partners' cooperation. Our correspondents with us here, Max Koschek, is with us here in studio, and Simon Young is over in Munich. Let's listen first to what the defense minister, German defense minister, had to say about the importance of NATO and cooperation.
Our partnership makes us stronger, and it increases our sovereignty, because in our partnership, interests are consistent with our values. While to some, the world is a zero-sum game, we see the opportunity for growing together and prospering together in those partnerships. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, NATO remains our first choice when it comes to our security.
All right, Simon, let's come to you first. We heard Ursula von der Leyen there saying NATO remains our first choice. And we heard Gavin Williamson also say NATO is the bedrock of our security. Again, remind us, why is it so important to reiterate that commitment? It would seem obvious that NATO is an important part of security.
Well, I think because some have in recent years begun to question whether NATO does have the answers. Of course, in particular, President Trump in Washington has raised doubts. He suggested that NATO is no longer fit for purpose, that it doesn't answer the challenges. He's particularly concerned, of course, about what he sees as a failure by the European allies to pay their fair share of defence spending. He wants to hold them to their commitment to increase that to 2% of GDP. Germany, for instance, is one of many countries that haven't reached that target, but the German defence minister staying here again today, that Germany is on its way, it's getting there. Europe needs to do more, she said. The Americans are right to criticise us in that way. But she wanted to make the case for a much wider vision of what NATO is about as a defender of values, of human rights, of human dignity. So she was really widening the vision of what a defence community needs to do. It doesn't just need to be about cash and capabilities. It needs to be about values and democracy as well, she said.
Max, I want to ask you about what Simon just mentioned. You know, we heard Ursula von der Leyen talk about the return of competition between great powers and distinguish NATO from other alliances that exist in the world and talked, as Simon said, about values and interests, but also about fairness. What was she getting at from your perspective?
Well, she was obviously contrasting the NATO, the treaty, to other alliances that are currently being led by China and Russia. For example, the Belt and Road Initiative that's currently built by China, and the Eurasian Union that Russia is building up. And what she was doing, she was contrasting NATO against these two alliances in the sense that that NATO is not an alliance that's built on dominance. She was saying we're an alliance of equal partners, of equal members. Well, these alliances are obviously led by Russia and China and led by a dominant power.
Now, Gavin Williamson has also actually been speaking about NATO, as we said, and also talking about the importance of NATO, despite Britain leaving the EU, as we know, in just 6 weeks' time. Let's listen to his comments.
But as we continue to face threats in an increasingly dangerous world, we know that NATO is the best guardian for all of our security. So for the sake of our values and friends, we will continue to lead in NATO. We'll continue to build our alliances with close friends like Germany. We'll continue to deliver European security. We'll continue to step out into the world, protecting our friends, defending our interests, standing up for our values.
All right, so Simon, very clear that the German and British defense ministers are on message, sharing the very same message here that NATO is key. But we have again heard the call for more joint spending and acting from EU states. There's a very large, in fact, the largest U.S. delegation ever at the Munich Security Conference there at this weekend. We know that these bilateral talks that happen at the conference, that happen behind closed doors, are also really important. Will we see then talks precisely on this issue with the U.S. where there's been so much friction?
Well, I think that certainly will happen. How publicly it will happen remains to be seen. But you always get a major Russian delegation here in Munich, and, as you say, the largest ever congressional delegation from the US this year. And indeed, Vice President Mike Pence will be here as well. So he'll have an opportunity to meet his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. They've got a lot to talk about. Both countries have said they're pulling out of the INF nuclear forces treaty that really is one of the cornerstones of the sort of post-war, post-Cold War security order in Europe. So that is an absolutely massive focus here. What Gavin Williamson was saying there was, again, this idea of a values-driven NATO, but he had a slightly different emphasis as well. One of his key messages, of course, is that Britain will continue to play a role in European security even after it leaves the European Union. A lot of people have been concerned that that might not happen, but he said, no, we'll remain a stable partner, we'll do our best. And incidentally, on European defence cooperation, he said, we welcome that. We would like to see EU countries, and going forward, of course, he's talking about joining together. Germany and France, you know, they've got this scheme of a European army for the future. Well, you know, he's saying we like that kind of idea because it means there are more capabilities and NATO can do more.
Max, I want to ask you about this question of European defence cooperation. This is a refrain we've heard over and over from the German defence minister, but also from German leaders, many German leaders, that Europe needs to take its own defence, its security into its own hands. We heard this at last year's Munich Security Conference as well. Has this really materialized? Have we seen real progress on that front?
Not per se progress, but we see more of a debate or distinguishing understanding of what different parts of Europe want in that. So it was quite interesting to see in her speech, Ursula von der Leyen was actually explaining that both the United Kingdom and Germany are taking part in the NATO Enhanced Forward Presence, NATO mission that was introduced after the Ukraine crisis to kind of put more presence forward in the Baltic countries and in Poland. And both the United Kingdom and Germany are doing air patrolling there. And Ursula von der Leyen was saying in her speech, it's both the United Kingdom Typhoon jets and the German Eurofighter jets. And that already explains one of the big problems we're currently having in Europe. There's too much difference in the different military capabilities. They're not streamlined. That we're using different jets, equipment. And that's what's the big kind of current challenge for European military alliances, to kind of have a streamlined joint force, because so many different countries are using different equipment.
Okay, so that's one of the hiccups for European defence. Of the issues that we heard Simon just mentioned, because this is a big picture conference talking about the various security challenges in the world right now, what do you think are the most important that will be discussed this weekend, especially for Germany, the host?
Well, what we have heard already from German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen, and what we also would like to hear probably from the other German speakers who are coming in the upcoming days, is how they're going to keep pushing the message of promoting multilateralism. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said she wants to kind of talk about that on the Munich Security Conference in the upcoming days. And we've already heard Ursula von der Leyen giving a sort of the first pack of that, promoting alliances, promoting multilateralism, and giving a clear statement in the theme of the Munich Security Conference of fragmentation in the world, that this is an option how to defend it.
Yeah, saving the liberal world order. That is very much defining this year's conference. Okay, our correspondents Max Koschek here in studio and Simon Young down on the floor there in Munich. Thank you both. We'll talk to you a bit later.